I'm not big for introductions, but I'm excited to be doing something for the Diamondback podcast where we're going to be pulling in a pro guest, and the guest is someone who's both a friend of mine, but also a very legitimate pro in the industry and competitive angler, very successful, innovative angler outside of that realm. So I'd like to introduce Jack Arnot here. Jack.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for having me, Joe. And I think this is an awesome opportunity because I've known you since I was probably 13 or 14 years old, and I've got to see you evolve as a rod maker and an angler as well. So I'm really excited what we have in store.
Well, I think that embarrassingly to the point, people know plenty about me and get to hear a lot of my takes on things. So my goal is to get some of your perspectives here, and right right from the start, one of the big things that the whole time I've known you that's influenced the things that you do is the competitive fishing. And interestingly for me, the whole time that I've known you, I've seen you dial into the finesse points that allow you to be a highly competitive angler in that realm, while also being able to fish fun things in your own time outside of what you're doing for the competitive fishing. I've always seen you from the first time that I ever got to go out there and interact with you in Colorado, where you lived there with your mom. You were like, okay, you showed me some of the stuff that you could do with dry droppers and the technical game, like the fine points of it on tough technical water there in your backyard. And then you were like, and let's go and fish this golf course pond
Yeah.
for these like big trophy fish. And so I want to ask you to talk about how you've been able to keep a separation and be able to do these things. There are these fun, engaging things outside of the competitive fishing while you've still dialed in the framework of being able to be focused on what it takes to go to an international competition and be a successful competitive angler for the Team USA A team.
For sure. And I think it's super awesome that you picked up on that because I've wanted to speak on kind of the two lives that I live within fishing. And yeah, obviously I got plugged into competitive fishing very early on. I was about 13 or 14. Fell in love with it, excelled really quickly because I had some awesome mentors. And then kind of my separate life was fun fishing, right? And for me, I look at it as I can't just do competitive fly fishing. I'm always trying to grow as an angler. And I think the fun fishing that I do affords me to learn even more about fishing than what competitions present me. And I think some of that is the mentors that I grew up with. You, for example, Cam Chiaffi, Joe Schwanke, just other people that were not always competitive fishing, right? And for me, it felt super refreshing because a lot of the year my mind is on competitive fishing, right? But you have to take breaks. You can't, at least for me, I can't do competitive fishing 365 days a year. I need to have fun. And I found a lot of people to fish with that were also very fishy and had their own styles, but taught me more things about fishing that wasn't directly related to competition fishing. And in a weird way, it does kind of bleed over back and forth. It's not a hard line down the middle. So it's a balance for sure, but I love to have fun fishing, and I like to just be the best angler I can be. And for me, even though I call it fun fishing, it's still highly technical, very well thought out plan of attacks.
Oh, absolutely. And when we say fun fishing, it is stuff that we take very seriously. But when we say fun fishing, it's the framework is the freestyle
Yes,
framework of being able to do really whatever the heck you want, time and place with the type of gear. You're not limited. Or for me, the aspect of the competition fishing and having rules and regulations around what you could do and how you could do it. I'm
That's
always kind of anti. I've always bucked against like the limitations of rules and regulations my
awesome.
entire life, and that was a big reason why I've never really delved into much competitive fishing whatsoever. However, the technical nature of what you can do when you're not limited to that for someone who with the competitive fishing, it forces you to see how technical you can go within a framework of other people's rules.
Hmm.
And so, talk to me about how that type of mentality and seeing how people have, dialed down the diameters, the knots, the rigging has spilled over into what sort of stuff you do when you're not in a competition and you're able to do whatever you want and fish for whatever species and whatever, conditions.
For sure. Yeah. Obviously, like I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the rules, right? It makes me feel better that, everyone has to follow them and they're there to make things as fair as possible, right? And create an equal playing field for everyone. But there's a lot of times when I'm competitive fishing where I'm like, instead of a 4 mil bead, I'd love a 4.6 millimeter bead. I could do this way more effectively, right? So that's kind of where my mind starts going when I'm not in comp mode. Is I know how I'm trained classically in how to fish a single dry fly really well, how to fish a 2-0 nymph in the smallest pocket for the spookiest fish in France, right? But I think that being able to blend those a little bit does make me a better angler, because maybe I'm practicing and I'm not fully focused on comp fishing, and I'll try something new and I'll think, okay, I can totally do that in a comp. How am I going to make it fit within the comp rules? Or vice versa, is I'm competition fishing and I'm fishing a deep seam, and I wish I had 10 more foot of reach with a 10-10-2 Diamondback rod. Um, and then when I'm fun fishing, I'm like, okay, I'm going to fish a 50-foot mono leader and I can drop my nymph or fly exactly where I want to on the other side of the river. And that's kind of where I fit within those constraints. Is I try to look at it from both angles and then find a way that will work for my personal fishing, and then find a way it works for my comp fishing.
Okay, I want to ask a multi-level, a multi-tier question here because I want to talk about how when you're fishing on your own, let's focus on trout. I
Yeah.
know a lot of people, trout is the thing, and let's just say, not just frame fishing for trout. When you get outside of that competition fishing framework where you're fishing for trout and you're fishing for trout, however you want to do it, I want to talk about how we choose our terminal gear,
Hmm.
like the beads you mentioned and the hooks,
Yeah.
and also the way that we rig, what we choose to rig with, how long it is. So both of those things I think are really kind of interesting topics for someone who's the level of competitive angler that you are, and also goes out and does some sporty stuff and catches, big trout on the type of hybrid tactics, that we use that wouldn't be legal to use in the competitive in like the FIPS scene. So talk to me first about the leaders, the diameters, and the rigging of what you would do when you break free from the regulations of the competition and you can go and do your own thing and you're on, you know, whatever you want to do. How do you kind of do things differently outside of the competition for your own sporty fishing for
Yeah,
trout?
absolutely. I'd probably start with the rivers that I'm fishing for fun are a lot better than the rivers I'm forced to fish for for competitions. But yeah, what I try to do is I try to target large trophy fish. That makes me happy. And I think I have two styles of doing that. One's a much more finesse style, probably a little closely more related to my competition fishing, and that's using much longer rods. I'd say Diamondback rods that I fish the most for trophy trout in Colorado here in Wyoming is probably a 10-10-2 ideal nymph. And for me, that's just a rod that I fell in love with for smaller streamers. So anything weighted 4 mil to 5.5 mil tungsten beads, probably size 10, size 8 streamers. That's a rod I use to work water very effectively. You know, water here in Colorado can be really pressured for big fish. So for me, it affords me access to just work small streamers much more effectively into tighter spots. And I'd say for leaders, I'm still running pretty thin leaders, 4 pound, 5 pound leaders, tippet anywhere from 6x to 4x with smaller streamers. I try to keep that really light to preserve my sink rates with smaller streamers. I think that what size tippet you're attaching onto the terminal end of your leader, no matter what fly you're fishing, is the most important aspect of how you want that fly to swim, and also how you want the fish to react to it. I think with lighter tippet for me, like if I'm fishing a 5.5 mil streamer on 5x, I can kind of pound that streamer in a much smaller spot and give it smaller jigs throughout a seam, where maybe the average angler, even if they're Euro nymphing with a streamer, are giving it nice long jigs, which might not fire up a big fish because they see a lot of tippet or a lot of flies and tippet and whatnot. So that's the lighter end of my terminal tackle. If I'm in Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, looking for big fish, I'm probably fishing a 10'6" or 10'7" Aeroflex rod. That's what I use for my lake fishing in competition. So for me, it's just a very comfortable rod for me to fish. And that's also going to be a longer mono rig, probably 50 to 60 feet of 8 pound or 6 pound Maxima Chameleon. I think it does really well with rubbing against rocks. You know, I'm bumping and grinding that stuff into weird places. So I like a leader that affords me a little extra oomph when I can set the hook. And then from there, I'm fishing a lot of 3x, 6 pound, 8 pound, really, but heavier flies. They could be.
So are you fishing those rigs with a sighter? Or are you just going from that chameleon into a leader and fishing by feel when you're fishing that
depends.
style?
For the larger rigs, I fish on feel a lot more. I don't usually use a sighter, but for the lighter streamer rigs, I'm always using a sighter.
And what's in your hand when you're fishing those lighter rigs?
I'm always feeling I'll always pinch the line. How I like to fish is I like to get my distance out.
I meant the question was more the material. When you're nymphing with that lighter rig, what's the material that's kind of coming off your reel?
Oh yeah, I would say Suffix is my favorite company for leader material.
Is it Siege?
No, I don't know if I want to name it specifically. Okay. It is hard to get though. But
the good stuff always is.
Yeah, it is hard to get, but it's very supple, but not too supple. I don't like leader materials that are too stiff because I can't feel, even with small streamers, I can't feel what's going on at the bottom with my fly.
I'll share one that I'm using currently because I like to try a lot of different things, and I'm interested in the catfish fishing market. They've got this inexpensive stuff that's often very durable. So as I was coming back from fishing in South America, I was sitting around the airport with Lance Will, and we were talking about what catfish products were available because we've been using Whisker Seeker, which only goes down to 15 pounds, super durable, it's oval. And we saw this product Slime Line.
Perfect.
And so I got some Slime Line in 10 pound. It's pretty good. It's green, it's durable. It's limp. I mean, I use kind of bigger sizes than a lot of people do, but Slime Line right now is getting it done for me. I just caught that big striped bass down in Tennessee on the 3-weight I have a slime line tied to a 3-weight floating line, like into like a low grade quality backing. When I got into that, I was like, anyway, so that's what's in your hand. Now, the thing I want to talk about is is how, and I don't want to make any presumptions, but what I want to talk about the difference between what the competition style hooks are and what style hooks you might choose when you want to go and like get your hands on that I mean, you talked about wanting to catch like the big fish. So I want you to talk about how you kind of make a division in your terminal tackle, like the hook, hooks in particular, how you separate stuff that's for competition and stuff that's for when you're after something good, something
For
big.
sure, because that's exactly how I have it. I have my comp boxes, and then I have my other boxes that don't get to see the light of day too often. But yeah, hook gauge, hook design is something I take into consideration more than most. For competitions, I'm using a lot of light wire dry fly hooks, fulling mill specifically, and then I do fish the Umpqua Purdy jig quite a bit, which is just an all-around nymph hook that's done me really well over the years, and then some other fulling mill models for lakes. But the comp stuff is much lighter than what I would employ for big trout. I mean, I've caught huge trout on dry fly hooks, but it's never an enjoyable experience. But mainly the reason for those light wire hooks is just faster penetration with fish that are not eating well. So everything's slimmed down a lot more in terms of wire gauge size. And then for large fish, large trout especially, I fish a lot of Hannock 400s for smaller streamers. And then larger streamers, I get a lot of hooks from the bass fishing industry that come pre-molded with weight on them.
Understood. How frequently have you had failures with the competition hooks when you get into a big fish in comp type situations?
Oh, that's a tough question. It's something I think about a lot. Not as often as you would expect. I think in the Czech Republic last year for Worlds gave my hooks the biggest run for their money because we had these ginormous stocked fish that I don't know what they fed them over there, but they were just turbocharged. And they would eat streamers, so you'd wait out there. So I waited out there with my 10'7" Aeroflex sinking line, 2 streamers, and you bomb it out in the current and you just seesaw it. And you were getting doubles. I was fishing 2X. And I started having hooks fail on me like probably halfway through my session. I think I ended up with 63 fish, which was like the comp record for Worlds there, for that Worlds. And I was just breaking hooks left and right. And then finally went into my box and found a fulling mill lake hook and strapped that sucker on and didn't break any more hooks off.
Is that something in the future in competitions in places where there might be big fish that's like worth considering?
I think so. I mean, I like to say I put these hooks to the test, but a Hannock 400's never failed me for trout over 25 inches. I mean, it does depend on the river, but that's something that crosses over from the comp world, right? You know, maybe I'm not fishing in a size 8 in a competition and I'm fishing in a 12, but it's a hook that makes me feel very comfortable for larger fish. And same with the fulling mill lake hooks too. I know that in a comp, if I have a couple flies on those hooks, I have full confidence if I do bump into a big fish.
When you get hook failures, what do they look like for you?
Most of it's hook points, and that probably pisses me off.
Is it the very hook point, like being bent out?
Yep, and that's probably what put me off a lot of hook companies throughout my career. Is you go fish, and I kept getting flies back with hook points that were bending in, and that does not make me happy. So that's one of the main things I look for, is a hook that I can go fish in pocket water very aggressively, that can get beat up quite a bit. Other hook failures, I don't really have a lot of stuff that bends out on me just because I do fish a lot smaller tippet than most. So I'd say hook points.
in my experience with hook failures, you're more likely to have that very tip of the barb not be able to handle that hard bony part of the mouth. Usually it's like a big male brown.
Yep.
Or a big brown, just, you know, in any form, can have a really hard bony mouth that can do that if you hit them in the wrong point. So I remember when the really fine tipped point hooks started to come out, I remember buying those and tying on them and going and like hooking big marginal water trout on them, and right away seeing that the needle point type hooks, if you were getting into like fish that measured in pounds and they were eating, you know, gnarly food sources, the very tip of the point of those hooks, you wouldn't even hook the fish really. You'd get a bite and the fish would just not stick, and then the hook point would be really at the very last bit of it, clearly turned, you know,
not the right
like
way.
That.
And I think you know more than most, but especially when you are targeting large fish, it might be 1 bite a day or 2 bites a day. And for me, I'm always checking my hook point on big flies that I'm fishing, because if I'm looking for 1 bite a day and I miss a fish because my hook point's not right, that'd make me, it's happened to me before, but it pisses me off quite a bit.
When you're doing that type of fishing, the thing is, any place that you're going to get that few bites, the fish that commits to eating your fly is probably going to crank it.
Yep.
You know, so in those places, it's really not, in places where you're going to get that few bites, having the hook that's going to hold the fish is far more important than having a hook that's going to stick the fish, because you're going to have a chance. You know, those usually aren't the bite. You know, those are the fish that break your line or something more likely than the fish that you don't register the bite.
Yeah. And I think a way I look at it too is like, how can I beat this hook and fly up enough throughout a day where I can still hook a big brown, right? Because you start putting your fly into weird places and it comes back, you know, sometimes the hook point can look a little crazy, but that's like one thing for me, is finding hooks that can take a little bit of abuse throughout the day.
Will you sharpen, or do you toss a dulled hook?
I toss it. I don't sharpen. I tie enough flies where I got backups.
I carry a file. It's got to be a pretty damn good fly for me to sharpen it and not just use a fresh, because I like having a fresh. Anytime I'm throwing a fly into a place where I think there's a good likelihood that a nice fish is going to bite it, I'm usually throwing like a fresh.
It's good juju to pull a good one out of the box.
Yeah, there's, because I kind of keep like a rotation of flies that I'm fishing, and there's spots that I'll throw a fly that's already been fished, and there's spots like the first cast into a spot that I walked in to get to. You know, almost all the time I'm committing a sticky, sharp, unadulterated new hook. What right now, if you were on bigger flies, what's your hook of choice?
I would probably have to say, this is a tough question, honestly, and I've been bouncing back and forth between it. Are we talking streamer or nymph?
Let's say if you were imitating like a jig streamer, like 2 to 8.
I would have to say Hannick 400 for an 8.
What shape is that hook?
It's a straight point. Okay. Straight shank hook. It's no curves, no bends, no nothing. And it's got a good sturdy wire. And then for larger stuff, I'm a big fan of anything Gamakatsu makes. I probably have a bunch of them laying down here right now that I could look through, but I kind of will sample a little bit of everything and then try it all and then find one. But right now I'm a big fan of a lot of the Gamakatsu models for the heavier hooks.
If you want to fish a fly with the hook facing up, will you use that straight shank hook and use some sort of a slotted bead or shaped bead on the bottom to make it ride hook point up?
For sure. A lot of the counter, or not counter sunk beads, but slotted beads and teardrop beads. I like the teardrop beads the most. And then for bigger stuff, I forget the company. I think it's Super Hair potentially. I think they have some of the best hooks.
Oh, boy, that's a hook company. What's I
Hookish.
Is that like a secret? I don't. There's not many hook companies I don't know about. I'm not sure what you just.
I know you've got some
mentioned
of
there.
them. Maybe I'm not pronouncing the name right, but I know you've got them.
All right, this comes up a lot with me where I'm like, I've never seen that thing before, and someone's like, yes, you have. I handed it to you like 5 months ago, and you wiggled it. I'm like, oh, okay.
I also make up names for things all the time, so
So let me ask you, whether it's outside of com fishing, what things are your favorite things to do when you've got the free time, and also kind of if you were able to get to whatever you wanted to go and spend time doing, what are the things that you would spend that time doing if you had, kind of the unlimited resources to travel and, be like Cam and go and, get to some of the places that I haven't been to?
crush big fish all day. um, yeah, I think they're like two ends of the sliding scale. One of them would be like very finesse dry fly fishing. Could be a small trout, big trout, doesn't matter. I love dry fly fishing. I love the technicality of it. Just makes you like pause for a moment and think about what you're actually trying to do. And I think that for me, that brings me a lot of joy and happiness is just dry fly fishing. It could be fishing a split wing up the skinniest water no one's going to touch, or it could be throwing a hopper for a 28-inch brown in Wyoming. It doesn't matter. I could do it all day. So that makes me really happy. I'd love to go travel the world and just dry fly fish. And then I think on the opposite end of the scale, fishing big nymphs, big streamers on long, heavy mono rigs in just huge rivers that those fish maybe haven't even seen a fly at that depth before. Also excites me quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. I can connect with that with I had when I was young, maybe from 13 to 18, I primarily fished dry flies.
Okay.
And I guess my vision has gotten worse, and it got a lot harder for me to track the flies on the surface, and it really, I wasn't able to do the types of fishing that I could at the ranges that I could when I was a little bit younger and could kind of see where the hell my fly was. So I think for me, that was a big reason why I transitioned into a lot more of the field-based fishing. But I know that as much as I remember being frustrated at the point where I started bringing the glasses out on the water for the first time, trying to figure out where my fly was so I could, fish dry flies in the evening. And it was just that made it a lot harder. So
sure.
Anyway, I'm just complaining about my I'm like geriatric, although it happened in like I was like 25. I couldn't see where my dry flies were.
But I think it's cool. It allowed you to find, your own style as well, for better or for worse,
We all have to, adapt, just like any animal that has like an injury, you'll see them immediately just react. It's something that you can't just be like, woe is me, I can't like fish good anymore. So yeah, it is what it is. I think for me, being forced to fish by feel really developed some tactics that I probably wouldn't have developed if I had great vision.
For sure.
I would be leaning into other things than what I do now, but because I have not been able to have the visual strike detection with those nymphing tactics, I've been trying to fish by feel in technical ways for years and years. And I really think being able to fish by feel and feel what's going on helps to design the rods right. Yep. And to get things right with the actions, what sticks the fish, what could drop the fish, what you have to, zero in on in what you're feeling with the rod. Being able to do so many things by feel definitely has contributed to the design aspect of the rods.
100%. I think I noticed that a lot from you because I also do fish by feel a lot, even though I am competitive fishing where I'm staring at a sighter 24/7. Like when I fish Diamondback rods, it allows me, like, even though I'm watching my sighter, no matter the fly I have on, I can feel where it is on the bottom, right? No matter how big or small the fly is. And that for me is really important because um, I also do fish by feel, not fully, but it's something that's really important for me when I am fishing. And it's hard to convey to other people because someone might ask, how'd you catch that fish? Or how'd you do that? And I just say based on feel. And some people are very analytical and maybe don't have that. And some people are very fish on feel type of people.
When you're fishing under an indicator, or
Mhm.
when you're fishing under a visual, like a mono indicator that you're tracking, and you're choosing flies out of your box to fish in this style, do you find that you have certain flies in your box that the fish are more likely to move around in the drift to intercept, not to intercept, to move around and chase the flies versus having flies that they're going to just intercept? In your experience, do you find that you've got stuff in your box that you feel or see the bites differently
Yeah.
between different either types of bugs or certain nymph patterns?
Yeah. I think for nymph patterns, like especially the perdigons that I tie that don't replicate a single thing in the river, I mean, you'll have fish fly out 4 feet to come eat them, and they could be pink or orange or whatever. And for some reason, a lot of the more natural, dull perdigons that I tie that are just one material flies with a tail, they will move a lot more side for side for them, but they won't come out from under a rock and jam it. And then obviously, a lot of the junk flies we fish in comps, mops, eggs, worms, those are definitely the ones where you get a brown trout flying 10 feet downstream to come suck one of those up.
Do you notice any difference between imitating mayfly type imitations and caddis type imitations, that the fish eat them differently or feed differently when those bugs are hatching?
Yeah, I think for us in Colorado, the blue-winged olive hatch is probably the most important throughout the year. And I just fished one last weekend on the Eagle River, my home waters, and we had a crazy blue-winged olive hatch coming off from like 9 to 11. Fishing, I was fishing two super light soft tackles, beaded soft tackle nymphs, and they would move side to side probably another foot or two to come eat a blue-winged olive versus just a generic just kind of tan or yellowish perdigon I had on because I started with two different flies and then ended up on two light soft tackles. And I noticed that the fish were just, they could not eat them, and definitely moving a lot further for the bugs that were coming off.
When you're fishing a situation like that and you've got like a really good hatch going on, the fish are eating those small insects, how are you spacing your rig? And if you're fishing, I would expect you're probably fishing multiple flies. How are you setting up the dropper, and what sort of distance and
Yeah.
what sort of weight potential distance or equality are you looking for as you set your rig up?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I'll preface this by, people think competition fishing is just grinding the bottom with heavy nymphs. And for me, it's quite the opposite. And I've talked with Devin Olson about this quite a bit because I'm on the US team with Devin, and he's also been an awesome mentor for me throughout the years. But when I get into a run where fish are actively feeding, I will start with the lightest flies I can fish. So whether that means a brass bead up top and a small 2.0 tungsten on bottom, and I'm just trying to comb those first one or two fish out of the run that I know are actively feeding. I'll start with that, and they're about 20 inches apart, about comp legal length. Sometimes I will go a little longer by about 5 inches, if I want my flies to really kind of marinate in slower water. and then I'll work my way down. So I'll take the brass bead off the top dropper and put on 2 2-0s.
Now, I'm going to stay with you, but as you're starting there, what's your distance and how are you setting up the dropper tag as you're fishing like a brass bead and a 2 mil? Do you have a visual sighter there, and how far are you below that with that first dropper tag when you're fishing, when you're starting to fish a run where you know the fish are feeding high in the water column, eating bugs?
Yeah, I think from my sighter, I'll put on about 3 to 6 feet of tippet. It kind of depends on the situation. If I know it's going to be a deeper run, I'll, like, let's say it's an 8-foot run, I'll probably rig 6 to 7 feet of tippet from my sighter, keep it way long. And when I am fishing those light bugs, I'll just keep my sighter up a lot higher. And then as I work down, I'll put heavier flies on. But I think length from sighter to your first tag, also with brass beads, or lighter tungsten beads, 2 mils, 2.5s, I keep my tag a lot longer, 3 to 4 inches. And that's because if there are fish actively feeding, there is something about presenting that fly naturally to them. A lot of tungsten flies have a tendency to just shoot right down to the water. And I think that puts fish off. For my fishing personally, I think there's something about lacing a nice cast up into a riffle and keeping those 2 bugs almost at the same depth. And you're bringing them to the fish. They're not sinking straight down. So I think that's super important for me. And then as I progress, I'll just go a little heavier, and I'm just trying to mine fish out of a run.
So do you keep that similar length and spacing and then just start to mess around with your kind of like weight sizes as you're trying to get deeper?
Yeah. And then if I go into new water, like pocket water, I'll shorten things up. And that's why I like to leave things long, because especially in a competition, you're fishing various pieces of water within a 15-minute span. And you want to find something that will work for each water type. So I do tend to rig long. And then if I work up into some faster pocket water, I'll keep my flies exactly comp legal distance, which is about 20 inches. And then I'll shorten my length from my sighter to my first fly just with a quick knot by about 2 foot, because in faster water, I like to be a lot more connected to my flies, because they'll eat quicker. So that's kind of how I work things. And I do the same thing for my non-comp fishing. Start long and then shorten up as needed.
Do you keep that comp legal distance just because that's what you're comfortable to moving the flies around at, so you stay locked into that?
Yeah, 100%. Even if I'm in Wyoming fishing an indicator, I will keep my 2 fly rigs about 20 to 25 inches apart on tags.
And when you're fishing a bug hatch like this blue and olive hatch, and you're starting to work deeper into the water column, do you maintain that ratio of keeping a heavier fly on the bottom and a lighter fly above it?
Always. I think there are very few cases for me where I'm putting the heavy fly on the top dropper. I think heavy pocket water is the only exception. And Michael Bradley, who's on the U.S. team as well, kind of introduced me to some new pocket water fishing strategies with heavy fly on top when I was younger. And I kind of took note of that. And also Gabe Witosh, who is a youth team kid. But it's not something I do a lot. I prefer to have the lighter fly on top for me personally.
Do you ever like to have flies the same weight, or do you always like to have a differentiation where you've got a clear, heavier one that's going to lead your position?
That's a phenomenal question. It depends on the water type. If I'm fishing riffle water that looks very uniform and it's going the same speed, I'll try to match the bead size equally to what I have on point and what I have on the tag. If I'm fishing water that I think there could be a slight drop off or a little pocket I could lower my sighter down into, I'm always fishing the heavier fly on bottom and then lighter on top. So it could be a 3 mil on point and a 2-3 on the tag. But that's probably how I fish 80% of the time.
When you've got a sighter, are you always fishing jig style hooks below those?
Most likely. Yeah, I would say 99% of the time. I just like the hookup ratio of a jig hook, in my opinion. And I think with some straight shanked hooks, especially with pretty grabby river bottoms we have here in Colorado, even if you put a tungsten bead on it, it just doesn't flip right. I like that fly on bottom, and I like that the fish can see it come off the rock. I think one of the weirdest things I do in my personal fishing is stalling flies on rocks for very tough fish here in Colorado, and you need a jig hook for that. So it could be an egg, a mop, or a worm, especially in the fall through winter. But putting a fly on a rock just in front of a fish, and they'll come over and just eat it on their own free will. They don't want it drifting. And that's something that works really well in the winter here is putting eggs on rocks just in front of fish, pausing it, and they'll look at it for 30 seconds and then come over and scoop it up. But you need to have a jig hook for that.
Do you ever employ a taper between your sighter and your flies when you're fishing this way?
Never. I fish level straight through. And I think my fishing style has changed a lot, because when I first got into competitive fishing, we were fishing, 20-pound, 15-pound leaders, tapered, Maxima. And then the next year it went to 15 and 12-pound. And then the next year it went to 10 and 8-pound. And then now I would say 90% of people at a world championship are fishing a straight level leader of some sort of 2.5-pound to 4-pound. And that's kind of the evolution I've seen throughout the comp world. And there's a reason for it. I think it's the most effective way to fish nymphs currently is a light level leader. And it's not easy to cast, and you have to work on your accuracy a lot, but I do think it's the most effective way to fish 2 nymphs if you want a Euro nymph.
Now, if you were someone who did not want to handle the micro size line in your hands when you were fishing that way, what do you think is like the hybrid solution? So it's like, okay, I want to fish fine and light with beads and bugs, but it's overwhelming for me, or I'm just irritated by the lack of durability or lack of handling ability of a lighter line. Because I won't fish that light, and I want this to be about what you are doing. But if you were, talking to someone who was saying, I, don't want to go quite that light, what would be your suggestion for them for being able to try to fish light bugs, light rigs?
Yeah, there's 2 routes you can go, because, I obviously used to be a guide for 4 to 5 years in college, and clients would have me fish, and I would catch a couple fish on a 2 mils with my personal rod, and give them the rod, and they can't even cast it 5 foot. And that kind of made me realize, like, what I'm doing might not work for everyone else. And I think that's true for all of fishing. Even the 5 guys on our world's team, the way someone fishes one rig may totally not work for me. So I'd say, getting back to the topic though, if you want to fish light bugs and you don't want to Euro nymph with a 2-pound leader, the best way to do it is with a long dry fly leader. And you're tying about a 12 to 18 foot dry fly leader. It could be any dry fly line, 2-weight, 3-weight, 4-weight, whatever you please. A very small dry fly, probably a clink hammer, something that can support, small bugs, which doesn't take a lot. I think the smaller the dry fly, the better for indicator fishing. And then you're adding probably like 6 to 7 feet of tippet on there. And you're fishing like a micro indicator in a way. And I think that's the best way to put small bugs out there, because you have the reach and you also have the control of the fly line in your hand.
And so that would be situations where you're not going to fish too much beyond a certain length, but you'll be able to really pick it apart and dial in, make controlled, stalled out presentations with the small dry fly as your indicator point.
100%, because even with a tapered Maxima dry fly leader, you can still hold onto the fly line if you want to do a 10-foot cast or 20-foot cast, and that leader will still turn over your bugs even without the full weight of the fly line out there. So you could fish it tight, or you could fish it a little longer, 20, 30, 40 foot if needed.
So you're not very old, but you have been fishing hard for enough time during this really dynamic time in kind of the transition of tactics in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Because around the time that I met you, a lot of the tactics were, they've changed so much since then to now. It's not like people weren't Euro nymphing, but they weren't dialed into the light rigs in the same way that a lot of people are now. So what I want to ask is, over that time, as the common fisherman's tactics have really improved a lot in the fly fishing, especially in the nymphing realm of it, where people are doing that, how much of a change, or if at all, have you seen in the fisheries, in the way the fish react to certain presentations, fly sizes, bead colors, where they hold? Have you seen in that time for you any sort of transitions on the local waters that you're super familiar with, of how the fish, because the brown trout might live to 10, rainbow trout might live to 3 or 4. So this is just a couple generations of trout have seen this drastic transition of changes. So a lot of times it's the same fish for those old fish that have seen things change in their lifetime.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing I'll touch on is flies plummeting down to the bottom, especially with a lot more people fishing jig hooks and tungsten bead flies. There's a lot of fish that do not enjoy a fly rocketing down at them, whereas maybe 6 years ago or 8 years ago, they'd come scoop it up, no problem, like they'd never seen it before. And that's the biggest thing, is tungsten beaded flies for me. That's why I tend to fish a little lighter in my drift when I can, because I think it is due to a lot more tungsten beaded flies being commercialized, and also people who start Euro nymphing are very prone to putting their flies on the bottom very quickly. And that's the biggest thing I've seen here in Colorado is if you can present a more natural drift, it could be a nymph, it could be a streamer, whatnot. If you can present that more naturally with the least amount of weight possible, that's where I get the best eats for me.
I'm not gonna cannibalize this too much here, but I was just giving presentations down in Tennessee that were focused on this sort of topic. Mm-hmm. And I was talking about how things have changed for the fish with more people using things that sink really fast. And I was talking about how oftentimes, if we're used to catching fish on bugs, we have the perception that we put that fast sinking fly right where we perceive the fish to be, even though it's in deeper water. And so as the result is that fly plummets down, they come attacking the fish. And the focus of that presentation was talking about the zone of awareness of the trout when they're holding in places that I was describing as current ambush points, which is typically the type of spots that fish that are going to eat a streamer or a jig streamer type big heavy thing are going to be sitting, and talking about where they can see and how you can set up presentations that put the fly into a natural zone where the fish, as it comes into the fish's zone of awareness, it comes in at the same level in the water column where the fish are used to seeing their food come from, and not from vertical. Because I absolutely fully agree with you, have seen the same thing here. And I really think that there's that perception that if you see the spot where you think the fish is, that you can just use the faster sinking fly and put it there and get strike detection, and that should result in the fish in a reality like those fish are getting attacked by those 5 mil tungsten beads.
I think you explained that perfectly, and it's kind of, in my mind, I think of it as like being on plane with the fish's view, right? And that's kind of the zone of awareness you were talking about. And it's super interesting because in comps, you know, these fish get drilled for 5 sessions, 3 hours a day, sometimes twice a day, with nymphs just flying at their faces, you know, by anglers who are very talented. And I think later in sessions, that's where we see transitions to single dry fly fishing, super light dry dropper fishing. I know there's countless stories where, you know, people are winning world championships on dry flies in the last session because the fish have been nymphed into oblivion. And that's the kind of lengths you have to go to. And if you have to commit to fishing a single dry fly for 3 hours and be comfortable not catching a fish until the last 15 minutes to win a medal, that's what you got to do. So even outside the nymphing realm, I think for me, dry flies is something I utilize a lot in Colorado to catch fish that people are not catching. And we have a river here called Clear Creek. It gets very shallow, a lot of ankle deep water in the middle of summer. The best way to fish it is a single dry. You will catch 100x the amount of fish you'd catch on a nymph with a single dry fly, because you are working. It opens up the whole river for you. And yeah, I think for those sneaky fish, they don't even want to see a nymph anymore. Sometimes in Colorado, they want a dry fly.
Have you seen transitions in with where the fish are sitting and where the vulnerable fish are, where you find the spots that you get your fish?
For sure. Yeah, I think the rivers that get pressured the most, which I really try not to fish a lot of the time. I'm happier in Wyoming, happier where no one's around me. I either see them sitting right where people will walk into the river, and I think they do it because it's like their alarm bell, right? It's 7 a.m. Okay, people are coming. Time to go find my little hiding spot, and they'll sit in a place where they know they're going to get spooked, and then go to the first accessible spot where they hang out for the rest of the day. And then let's say it's 7 p.m. It's time to come back out again, right? And I think for smaller fish, a lot of them just sit, like I said, where people walk. Like, you can go catch fish out of people's footsteps here if they're 15 yards upstream, because they'll just slide right behind people. You'll walk upstream and they'll just slide right in. And they might not even be eating, but they know once that person walks through, they can go right back into six inches of water.
This is a trend that I've seen also in other places of the world, where the really smart fish, oftentimes the big fish, will sit in these places where they're inviting you to spook them out. They'll sit right on like the traveled banks, but they're actually like aggressive, actively feeding fish if you can figure out a way to get a fly to them without spooking them.
Yeah.
And for me, I've found that with those jig streamers, getting way above a pool and doing this tactic that's similar to what people do for some of the Great Lakes and ocean run fish. They'll do this thing that's back trolling, where they'll have like a drift boat, and they'll have things that are like wobbling crankbaits, and they'll slowly back them down towards the fish.
Yep.
And I ran into a pattern. I ran into it by accident. Just a couple times I hooked fish running these long kind of far side presentations, and my fly swaying in to the bank that I was on, but like 50, 60 feet downstream. And suddenly in this nondescript bank water, I was hooking trophy class fish that I was targeting. And, you know, once it was a fluke, but after a couple times, I started to see that there was a way that these fish that were actively looking for food were sitting in spots that you couldn't get anywhere near them, you know, other than intentionally just like backing a fly right down shoreline from uncomfortably far away to fish,
Yeah.
you know.
And I think you think about this, a lot more than most as well. But when you are going for large predatory trout, I mean, you have to think like a big fish, right? And for me, it's two modes. Like I try to find their refuge where they would be happiest not eating, and usually those are places where you're not going to catch them because they're just not happy, and that's fine. Sometimes you do catch them out of spots where they're holed up, and you're just working a fly into a brush pile or some weird crevasse under a shelf that no one has put their fly into in years, or you're looking for the spots that they're actively going to feed. And I think the actively feeding spots are the hardest because it all looks like good water sometimes, right? And it's just luck of the draw whether that fish is there eating or not.
There.
And I think breaking down that water type is super important. Like you said, you have to think like that trophy brown trout. What is it doing throughout the day? Is it having lunch? Is it napping? Because like we talked about, sometimes it's one bite a day.
The way I describe this to people is catching the trout on their terms, because the the fish are not feeding all the time, and those, especially that big trophy class fish, oftentimes is very calculated about where and when it does choose to feed.
Yeah,
And for me, oftentimes to get these fish in the daytime where I live, where there's not that many, but there's deep kind of New Zealand type pools, these rock pools around me in Vermont, and there's some big fish in the deep pools. Very hard to find them in the clear water, but it's a timing thing. Certain flow levels, there's trends where, I found a few of them last year after the water was up for a long time, kind of in the sweet part of the year in May. We had multiple high water events, and I realized the fish got really well fed, and the big fish kind of came out of structure and hiding and sat in the far back, most comfortable guts of the pools when the water stayed up for a long time, and they were still willing to eat. The water was kind of high and dirty enough where they felt protected,
for
but
sure.
a fly right on the bottom, right in the back gut of the pools. Once I realized that the big fish were in this same kind of pattern based on this trend, I went around and caught a number of big fish on the same type of presentation in the same back part of the pools, really targeting the bottom slow presentations where I don't usually take fish like that. Usually in those
Yeah,
waters, it'd be right up near the top part of the pools. But, I like to see those types of those patterns, that once you see what a truly big fish is doing, oftentimes there's other big fish that are able to get into getting big in the same types of waters by doing similar things. Once you see a pattern where it's like, okay, this type of presentation, this timing, these water conditions, usually there's a lot of factors that have to line up before you really actually see a pattern that you can do something with. And yeah, it's never something where people can do it where they're like, well, what's the fly that's going to go and get me the trophy fish right now? It's like,
yeah.
your fly actually is probably fine if you were in the right spot at just the right time throwing it.
Yeah, and at the right speed and angle. And I think for me it's really refreshing because when I comp fish, I'm trying to catch as many as possible, right? And then when I am enjoying myself and working on other tactics that are not competition related, I'm looking for one fish, but I'm also looking to replicate that structure again. If I catch one fish at 7 a.m., a big one, I'm going to go try that for the rest of the day. Like you said, you're going to pattern them. And it's just like comp fishing. You find something that works 15 minutes into your session, you're probably going to go grind it for the rest of your beat real hard because you need to have confidence. And I think when you're targeting trophy trout, you also need to have confidence. It just doesn't come as easily. It's to you because you're not touching as many fish. But once you move one or you flash one, you're like, okay, it's time to lock in.
How often for you is it a matter of a fly change to get the fish versus the time and place? I know there's times where you make a change and it results in the fish, but I'm wondering how often you see that with the bigger fish, that you see them actually reject something that you know was probably in their zone or in their lane, and then get a good bite you can register with a totally different fly.
Yeah, for me, I try to change my fly the least times possible when I am fishing big stuff, because I have confidence in it. I know if they see it, they'll move on it, they'll flash on it, or they'll eat it. Very rarely do I find big fish that are just totally unwilling to play ball. It does happen, but it's rare. So I have full confidence in my fly. Like, I'm happy fishing the same fly all day. And I'm not thinking, oh, it's sunny out, I should put a darker fly on, or I should put a lighter fly on. I'll grind it, because I do the same thing in comp fishing. I'll make the fly work. And sometimes is a weird occasion where you put something a little flashier on, or a little heavier, or something a little more gaudy, and you end up popping a big fish. And I don't know if there's a rhyme or reason to it. Tough to say.
I'll share that that's a trend for me on the big fish waters that I fish, that I'll oftentimes narrow it down to two confidence flies that are completely different.
Okay.
Like one's like a bug, like a big bug, and one's like some certain color, shape, weight configuration of a jig streamer. And I find that there's a lot of times where I'll fish both. And oftentimes, if they're my confidence flies, it'll go 50-50, that one or the other will take a nice, confident adult fish that you know is in the prime feeding lie and is seeing both of the flies, and similar size, both like a nice, good sized offering, but something right in the wheelhouse of like a big freestone trout. And I'm shocked how often that alternative fly gets a fish that I'm like, damn, you reject, because usually the one that I fished first is the one that I have the most confidence in.
Yeah.
So when I follow up with my alt bug and then I take a fish, oftentimes I'm like, you're a smart fish, for one thing. And it often surprises me where I'm like, I center punch this run with, this big grub or something that I know you saw. And then, first presentation with like a little olive streamer, fish smokes it. And those are smart fish. But I feel like the more pressure that the fish get, and the more people out there that have good tactics, good strike detection, and good flies in their box, the more often you're likely to see these situations where fish actually get like gun shy of certain types of food sources. It depends on the water, but I've seen this, in some of the places that are the more beat up, and also the smart wild fish, like the bat and kill, near us is one where the fish are very smart, very hard to catch. And when I catch one, oftentimes it's like not the first thing that I show it, and then it smokes, fly 2 or 3, and I'm like, okay, you liked that one, but you saw the
work
one
for it today. Yeah. No, I agree with everything you said. And for me, it makes me a lot happier catching a big brown on the fly that I'm not taking off all day, because I also want them to eat it properly. Like, I want them to be charged up, coming out of their zone to just destroy whatever I have on. I don't want them to just give it a little look and then say, oh, maybe I'll eat it. So I'm also looking for the fish to just eat that fly properly too, which, if it's not the fly I have on, I'm cool with it. I'll move on. I'll go find a new run. It doesn't matter.
Cool. I think we covered some really good topics, some dense topics. We got over an hour of that in. I think that we'll cut it off there. And I really appreciate your time. And, from Diamondback, we appreciate, your support from Diamondback, and appreciate you taking the time to do this interview with us tonight.
Yeah, can't thank you guys enough. And it's been pretty awesome from being sent one of the first prototypes that you made from Diamondback, and being able to test it and use these rods throughout the years. It's obviously caught me a lot of fish, but there's something that I hold really high to a high standard, and I'm excited for all the future products you make.
Love it. All right. Thanks, Jack. Thanks for your time tonight. We'll be in touch, and signing out here.
I appreciate it, man. I'll give you a ring this week.
All right, cool.
See ya.